The impudence, the audacity, the unmitigated gall of those knuckleheads of liberty podcasters, daring to voice opinions outside the mainstream of accepted thought. Listen if you dare. It's angry, it's funny, it's even sometimes sad, but it's always based on freedom and justice, as you will see. Here's our host, Jason McPhee.
Welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty. We're coming at you on October 24th, 2022, and it's that scary time of year. It's not so much Halloween. It's almost election season. So that's where we really see
People are already voting. It is election season.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, which makes it even scarier in some respects. But yeah, I tell you, it just seems like every day is one step further into Biden's abyss. But before we get into any of that, actually, we have a departure from that today. We have a special guest. We have Jacqueline Timmer she is director and founder of American Voters Alliance. And so we're actually going to talk a lot about that voting integrity today, so we can maybe see how we can make this a little less scary time of year, I guess. But let me introduce you to our panel first. In our upper left-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. In our lower right-hand corner, we have our screaming eagle of freedom, Tim Everett. He is a pilot in the state of California. In our upper right-hand corner, we have our special guest today, Jacqueline Timmer, and she, again, is the founder and director of the American Voters Alliance. And my name's Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host. So let's jump right into it. Let me see, James. Let me introduce also we have an invisible hand on the show as well, so you won't see him, but he's there every show, and we always don't say anything about him, but let's say something about him this time. That's James Just, our invisible hand. So James, can you bring up our web page? There we go. So this is the American Voters Alliance homepage. And so Jacqueline's going to tell us a little bit about the organization and what they do. So Jacqueline, take it away.
Well, thank you so much for having me on today. The American Voters Alliance was honestly kind of started on accident. I was working, and I apologize. We've got another guest in the studio today. We have Iro, our Great Dane puppy, and he's hanging out with me today. But the American Voters Alliance was more or less started on accident. I was working in marketing and was asked to come on part-time on a project looking into gubernatorial overreach during the COVID lockdowns. And so I took a camera and just started going around filming, interviewing people, and really looking into what was happening. And that turned into a larger project as we saw that a lot of the gubernatorial overreach mandates had to do with election law. And essentially that these lefty governors were using COVID lockdowns and emergency police powers to impact how the election would be administered in their states. And so that started happening early on before we really even knew what COVID was. And it became this, I guess, quasi mystery of, okay, why are governors starting to speak to election issues in regards to COVID when we don't even really know how this is going to impact us or what this virus is? And so that led to a deeper investigation, and lo and behold, turned into the American Voters Alliance, which is a 501c4 nonprofit organization. We are bipartisan, and we are dedicated to promoting accountability, transparency, and inclusion in the election process.
So in your work, have you found things that have really disturbed you in terms of election integrity?
Yes, I have. Now with that, there are so many things that have disturbed me. It's really concerning. And we won't have time to get into all of those now, but I will say that these are issues that have been taking place for an extended period of time. A lot of things came to the surface in 2020, and there's controversy around that. But I would propose and speak to the fact that this really was never about one particular candidate. This really has been about fundamentally altering our election process as a whole to favor a particular political demographic.
I see. So then, okay, then let me follow up then a little bit. Then, since there have been several issues, obviously, that have concerned you, then what would you say then would be the most concerning of the things that you have discovered in your research or in your interaction with voters or whoever you've been interacting with over the years that you've been in existence?
Right. So, as far as the most concerning thing, I'm going to speak to a principle and then I'll give you a couple applications of how that particular principle has played out. And that is disparate impact. So, when we look at the Help America Vote Act, which came out of the Bush v. Gore decision in 2000, it was legislation that shortly came after that. One of the things they were addressing is, hey, states, you actually have to put forward an election plan to the federal government in order to receive national funding, et cetera. And that plan has to demonstrate how you are going to administer the election in a way that doesn't favor one particular group of people over another, or doesn't treat a particular demographic of voter differently than another. And so with that, the states would put forth the plan, then they'd get the federal grant, and they would implement the election process. Now, I really want to be careful in saying this because there is a leftist narrative about voter suppression. We'll get to that. That's going to be important to our conversation on voter ID and some of these other elements. But what we do see is we do see a level of voter suppression in the concept of disparate impact. And what I mean by that is the application of the Mark Zuckerberg funds, as well as how voter rolls are being processed, the recent Biden executive order, the push towards HR 1 and HR 4. All of those policies create a two-tiered voting system. And it's similar to what we've seen with the DOJ, where they're going after conservatives, they're going after pro-life individuals. The FBI is raiding 87-year-old pro-lifers' homes. Absolutely insane. But you're not seeing, the Biden laptop come forward. You're going to have a phony settlement go on there. And so we're seeing this two-tiered system in America now that's creating a secondary class of voters, and those are conservative voters. And it's happening in the implementation of election policy, and there is ballot stuffing. There are these elements of fraudulent activity, but I would say this is actually being executed in such a way that it is a completely lawless administration of the election process itself in order to favor a particular demographic of individuals.
Yeah. And that's one thing that seems really disturbing is just simple ideas like voter ID and things like that. The idea that you would just assume we want to keep things a little bit secure so everybody has faith equally in the system. And the idea that somehow that is being attacked as not equal. And therefore, it's almost like if you say you want to police anything, then you're being not equal, I guess. I don't kind of understand that. And,
Well, the narrative is that if you require a voter ID, it's racism. That's the narrative. That's
right. Well, I have to have a photo ID to enter Costco. So
there you go. That's right.
To be able to vote and engage.
I didn't know Costco. Well, I didn't know Costco was that racist.
Yeah. Well, apparently it's very elite and prejudicial. But they were out of toilet paper during the pandemic too. So, it is what it is. But with the whole voter ID scenario, we are entering a world where the left creates these juxtaposing arguments, and then they get to pick and choose what they want. You saw this with the recent shootings where it's like, well, if you want your guns, then you hate your children. Like, we're creating these straw man arguments where it's like, well, you can either have voter security or you can have voter access, and you have to pick. And if you don't pick voter access, then you're a bad guy and you hate the minority population. Well, that's absolutely not true. You can have security and you can have access, but we shouldn't create civic responsibility into Amazon or a microwave culture. That's not what it is. That's not how it works. And honestly, that's what Gen Z and sadly my millennial generation, that's what we want. We want to be the victim and we want to be the hero at the same time. And so we want Amazon to deliver that for us. And Amazon is our daddy government.
It's funny that you raise these things about election integrity and the narratives that are out there. Right now in Georgia, they're breaking every record that they've ever had in elections. Right now, with the early voting have already started. It's amazing when these laws were passed and put in place. the media outlet, the Biden administration was talking about how these laws are so discriminatory, how they're going to cause voter suppression in minority communities, and on they went. And now Georgia, now we're seeing the
And the
impact of
highest
the law.
turnout.
I'm sorry?
And it's the highest turnout they've had.
That's right. They're breaking all sorts of records right now. But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I was just contributing to your point there. You're right. It is the highest turnout they've had. When people have faith in the election process, they show up.
Indeed.
They show up.
Exactly.
One of the things that was so wild about that Georgia scenario, they removed the World Series game from Georgia, from Atlanta, removing tons of potential money that would have gone into Black-owned businesses. And they took it to Colorado, who requires voter ID.
Yeah.
So it was just like, this is a show. Yeah. This is a show. You really stand for nothing because you're not standing on principles. You are just bullying people into your own ideologue, self-righteous position. And you're not actually standing on the own principles that you advocate for. It's absolutely insane.
Indeed.
One gigantic virtue signal. Tim, you were trying to get in and say something, or?
No, I was just going to say, I'm just shocked that the left is eschewing principles over partisanship. I'm so not used to that. It's just Jacqueline. I just do snarky comments. That's about all I'm here for.
Those are significant. That's significant.
Well, thank you.
Well, Jacqueline, you brought up, I guess what the big conflict is here is access versus, I guess, security, voting integrity, and I guess that the big issue that seems to be missing on the left is if you don't have security, then those, I guess, illegitimate votes will water down, will disenfranchise people who are casting legitimate votes. I mean, if you've got it's almost like vote inflation, I guess. We're seeing here now. I mean, my vote suddenly becomes worth less if there's an extra 3 that aren't real, I guess.
Vote. I like that one. Vote inflation. Yeah. Yeah. And that's not, the vote is not used as a verb. It's used as a noun.
Yeah.
Right, Jacqueline?
Thank you.
It's a vote inflation. It's a tax on voting integrity.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it does seem apropos. Yeah, exactly.
The only tax I believe in our house is called the pepperoni tax, and it's whenever my husband eats a pizza, if there is a pepperoni that's hanging off the edge of that slice, that is my pepperoni. That's the taxation that I believe in when it comes to our household. But when it comes to voter inflation and when it comes to this argument of the left, again, you've pointed out the inherent flaw, right? The left does not speak according to logic because they have full sale bought into postmodernism. So they get to pick and choose what they like in order to promote their narrative and push their policies. And when it comes to the left's policies, who benefits, right? When it comes to Biden's policies of the past couple of years here, who benefits? Well, it's the one-party system that benefits. It is the left entrenchment that benefits. And that's the only group that benefits from these policies, especially when it comes to election administration. And so, a lot of administrative, systematic, procedural elements, we've kind of put that on the back burner as conservatives. We're very policy driven in the sense of, certain issues or certain platforms, but we've really let the administrative state run wild. And that has bit us in the butt because how things are done matters to what is actually being implemented and effectuated in the end. And if you're counting votes or if you're processing votes and voters in a way that enhances, the far left progressive vote as opposed to conservative voters and they're being able to have access, that is the same implementation of what took place in the Deep South. It is the opposite side of the same coin where you're enhancing one demographic's ability to have access to voting, and you are diminishing another demographic's access to voting. And by the way, it was the Democrats that did that in the Deep South. They
we know that. We have talked about that many times on this show. You're absolutely right. Yes.
They're just dusting off the playbook and
there you go.
Exactly. There's nothing new under the sun. And people think, oh, voter fraud, voter issues. Well, that doesn't happen in modern America. Well, yes, it does. And it's happened from the very beginning. We have had fraudulent presidents, and they functioned as president and they operated as president. And that's, history moves on. But we have had these instances historically. And as we've moved more and more into a headline culture, into the Instagram scroll feed, we've completely lost track with the generational understanding of where we've come from, who we are, and what our history tells us as a nation, that we have to have certain checks and balances in place. We have 3 branches of government to check and balance each other for a reason. We have a federalist system for a reason, because historically, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and we are not a Machiavellian society, and we're quickly becoming one as we enter this postmodern landscape.
Yes. Well, Jacqueline, one thing you've mentioned here, you've mentioned that I guess your main concern, it sounds like, is that rules are being set such that they bias, I guess, access for one group over another. But are you guys also concerned with out and out just voter fraud? I mean, are you guys looking into ideas where just simply fraudulent votes are being cast, or is it mainly just the access issue?
So I'll say it's a both and let me put it in the context of the 2020 election itself. So with 2020, people went to bed seeing Trump in the lead. They woke up and somehow Biden just pulled out this, miraculous victory.
Miraculous victory, yes.
Yeah. And so with that, then there were a lot of questions. Well, there's only so much time that you have to investigate systemic voter fraud before the inauguration. And there was this whole thing with the Electoral College and whether Pence was going to send things back to the states. We can talk about all of that. But the long and short is that there's only so much time to investigate a systemic issue of voter fraud. Now, what we had immediately were confessions of lawless activity by election clerks and by mayors in the cities that were questionable. And for your viewers, I don't know who's familiar with the Mark Zuckerberg funds. Essentially, Mark Zuckerberg is a drop in the bucket. He gave over $450 million, which is more than the national government gives to the states in their grants each year. So he invested more in the election process than our national government. He gave it to a couple key nonprofits who are part of a larger nonprofit network that we have investigated. We have tracked the relationships between these groups. They are far lefty groups, Obama affiliates, etc. And those groups then contracted with local municipalities in the states, bypassing state election law and enacting and implementing the election process contrary to state law in a way that weakened election security, facilitated voting turnout efforts that would favor Biden as the political candidate, and then, get this, implanted their own people. So you had real-time data sharing between lefty nonprofits and government actors on who was turning out to vote with this early voting scheme. So there's this whole process that is a direct violation of HAVA. It's a direct violation of equal protection. It is egregious, and it is a major issue, and it weakens the laws in such a way that it favors and enhances the ability to have extreme fraudulent activity in these key Democrat strongholds within swing states. So that's what we were looking into, and we said, hey, proving voter fraud takes time. It's like a drug operation. You have to start with the mule. You've got to work up the chain. You have to turn people over time. That takes time. What we have right now is we have people confessing that they conducted the election completely lawlessly, where you have a man from New York City running the central count location in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where the clerk is pushed out on medical leave because she was bullied out of office, and we have the emails to prove it. So this is what we have. Now, with that, when it comes to the legal burden of certifying the election process, the unofficial results that come through the media are not the official results of the election. You have to go through a reconciliation process. You have a canvassing board. You have people that verify that the process was conducted lawfully. We were engaged with various canvassing boards where they're saying, hey, this is an issue. Something's wrong here. The numbers don't add up. The election should not have been certified in those cases because the burden of proof legally was that the election was conducted lawfully. First and foremost, that it was conducted according to state law. We knew it wasn't. We had confessions to that effect. And two, that then, because it was conducted lawfully, you can have faith in the results. Well, where's the faith in the results? Do you see faith in the results? I don't. I don't see that among the American people when I travel across the country. And so really, it was a certification and lawfulness issue. But what happened is the leftist media ran to the forefront and said, show me the fraud and show me it was enough to overturn the results. Well, that's never the threshold. And sadly, many conservatives ran forward and then overstated the evidence that they had in their possession because they were trying to meet a false threshold of the popular media rather than the legal threshold we should have looked to in the first place in order to have faith in our election process. And now we're in a huge mess. So do we look at fraudulent issues? We do, but we look at it in the context of this larger whole where we are finding a systemic network that has reconstructed the election process altogether.
Wow. You know, to enhance, I'm sorry, Tim, go ahead. Tim, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just beg to differ about my liberal friends. They all just love the election results. No complaints whatsoever.
It was the best election of all time.
The most secure too. The most secure.
Landslide in favor of the great and wonderful Joe Biden.
I just love that they had to run to superlatives. Like, you know, you could just say this was a great election, everybody's fine. But really, if you're just looking at this and if you don't give it like a rat's tush about the results, right? If you really don't care, but you look at it and suddenly there's mass mail-in voting in states that never had procedures or processes for mass mail-in voting, you're going to have some hiccups. But somehow now it's the most secure we've ever had. Look at Tammany Hall, for goodness sakes. They had to outlaw mail-in balloting in New York because of the Tammany family disenfranchising voters through mail-in ballots. Like, historically, we know that mail-in ballots aren't secure, but now they are the most secure. And you have to ask yourself, why is that? Why has the science, why have the statistics, why have the studies suddenly changed?
Well, and to top it off, we went from a 2016 election where all you could do is question it, and then the 2020 election,
civic duty to question it.
Exactly, where you're canceled if you question in 2020, but in 2016, resistance is patriotism, I guess, at that point.
But to Jacqueline, to further your point, I'm sure you're familiar with the video out of Georgia, in Fulton County, Georgia, of where there was obvious something going on there. They're pulling out suitcases from underneath a desk. You see them. There's one of the people who were processing the ballots, who ran it through on video, ran it through multiple times, ran it through the machine, the ballots, ran it through the machines multiple times. We saw all of this going on in Fulton County, and still those elections were certified, which I find kind of incredible to me.
And there was a report. Done, and I believe I think it was the Attorney General. Forgive me, I don't remember which official, and I don't remember his name, but there was a report done on Fulton County, Georgia, essentially saying there were all these issues with the election, but I don't know that it was intentional. So whoopsie, that was the report. That was the report. He went through and it was just, this was wrong. This was wrong. This was wrong. This was wrong. But, oh, whoops. Like they messed up. Oopsie daisy. We're better than that. Like, as a nation, I know we're bureaucratic. Nobody likes to go to the DMV, but we can figure out how to cast a ballot and how to count it. Like, we shouldn't be having all of these whoopsie type mistakes when it comes to something that is so significant and so important to who we are as a nation.
Well, we're getting close to the end here. We're at about 24 minutes. We only got about 4 minutes, but I wanted to ask you a few more questions about your organization so you
Yeah.
can leave that with listeners. And one of them, though, is just about you, because we like to ask everybody who comes on the show, if you've been woken up to liberty, what was it that woke you up to pursue this? Now, you talked about the COVID and all that, but is that when you sort of woke up to the importance of liberty, or was there something else that sort of rung that bell for you?
I had the privilege of being raised in the political. My father was a state legislator for 8 years and a state attorney general as well. He is the only person in U.S. history to have charged Planned Parenthood with criminal charges. At the time, if they had been convicted, they not only would have lost all their federal funding, but we were unaware they would have gone bankrupt. We didn't know that about their financial situation. They were covering up child rape, and they were falsifying documents to then cover that up. So whether you're pro-life, pro-choice, what have you, people died as a result of their covering up child rape, essentially. I know that's a high claim. I'm not saying definitively, but we have people that we know of who died at the hands of their aggressors as a result of that. So with that being said, we had a lot of people come after our family. People came after me personally. I'm an only child, so I was the avenue to my father. Helicopters looking in the windows of our house. While I was in high school, I was followed by unmarked media vehicles, had feces smeared in my car, went to church. I had literally poop all over my back. I kept checking my shoes, didn't know that it was on me. People trying to break into our house. The story goes on and on, death threats, etc. So that to me was just this real wake-up call of what is the cost of truth in a political environment where people are so willing to manipulate the truth, to flat out lie about you, to harm you, and to try and humiliate you when you're standing for something that is the rule of law and is protecting the most vulnerable, because it's unpopular. And so that, to me, I feel like I have such a great inheritance from my parents, because I saw their willingness to sacrifice for people they didn't even know, for the cause of truth and for the cause of the law, the rule of law. Now, I will say after that, I had a little bit of kind of like a PTSD type scenario. I left my college institution. I ended up finishing. I finished school, but went to California, started climbing some rocks, and it was just kind of like, God, who am I? Who are you? And what does this look like? And I didn't plan on re-entering the political. And then that was 2020. My husband is from a biracial family. He was called up in the National Guard to the LA riots. And I was like, God, we are dividing as a nation, because if I speak out against the BLM agenda, I'm perceived as hating those I love the most. And if I talk about racial issues, then that momentum of my voice is used to promote a Marxist agenda that will destroy the people it claims to protect. And so what is my role in this? And that's when I felt, that's when I got a phone call. I got a phone call within a month and started this project.
Well, getting right back to that, and James, maybe you could bring this back up real quick. So maybe you could leave us with a quick message about what your organization's doing and how they can join or help you out.
Right. So the first thing is to get informed. Follow us on social media, join the newsletter. And then we do have initiatives that we do where we can work with you, whether it has to do with our model election reform in your state. We do work across the aisle, and we have things that may pass in California. You never know. So connect with us on that. Becoming a poll worker or a poll watcher, we are facilitating this, and it's different county by county. So we help you navigate that in your local municipality. The main thing I would leave people with, though, is one person can make a difference. And the other thing is, when in the course of human history have we celebrated a victory when all the odds were in our favor? It's ludicrous. And you hear legislators all the time, well, if this happens and that happens and we get this in order, then I'm going to do something bold. Then I'll do something courageous. No, the time is always now, because what we have is the present. And so I would just encourage viewers that there's the opportunity to engage, and there's a place for you in that engagement.
And unfortunately, the time is now that we have to end the show. But boy, this was great discussion with you, and I would definitely encourage voters to, or our viewers rather, to go check out your site just to understand more of what you guys are doing. And by the way, you can join us for our next podcast where we'll be discussing some issues of election fraud with Jacqueline. So thank you so much all for tuning in, and we'll see you at the next one. Stay free.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.